Hello, I'm Lisa Doolittle from the Faculty of Fine Arts, and this is Ed Talks. Today I'm talking to Lee Burckes from the Drama Department at the University of Lethbridge. Hi, Lee.
Hi.
And welcome to Ed Talks, and we're here to talk about your teaching. But I'm interested in finding out about your background for the people who are watching. Where do you come from? How did you get into the field of drama? That sort of thing.
Well, I've been in drama for as long as I can remember. Theater's been, it's been my whole life. It really has been. When I was in high school, I had a friend who was working on a show. I had never heard of a show, had no idea what she was talking about. But her older brother was into theater and building sets, and she said, "Come, you're handy. You like to build things. Come help us build this set." So I went there. And I spent a day helping student carpenters with a teacher learn how to build sets. I would say that was that, but my true passion and calling, what I'm most passionate about with theater is lighting and scenic design, but lighting was my first interest. And I remember being there on the stage with a hammer building this flat, making this thing I'd never made before, and all of a sudden a stage light came on. And I looked up at it, and it might as well have been a bell. It was ding, that's what you need to do.
Wow.
And that was it. And
Wow.
I was 14 years old, and I loved it, and I learned everything about it and spent the rest of my life really doing that, because it just struck such a chord with me, the impact and the power that one thing had. It was really amazing. So that's how I got into theater.
Okay.
And how I became interested in it and where it came from.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? A lot of people get hooked in high school. Yeah, a real turning point. So then, the next question is, for these talks, is how then did you learn to become a teacher? Here you are on a teaching contract and a research contract at the U of L, and you're teaching, and how in the world did you learn how to do that? I think those stories are just fascinating.
Well, if you're in technical theater, teaching goes hand in hand with that, right? It's the way that it is, because it's always a new situation. Every production is different, has its different challenges. Mm-hmm. So you're always having to learn. And when you're always having to learn and you're working with other people who are also learning, you're also having to teach. You're working with people who haven't done things that you've done, you're discovering new things, and teaching happens as part of the process. I never considered myself a teacher, but looking back on it, that's exactly what I was doing. When I first started out my career, I was working as the lighting director, lighting designer, and master electrician for a large theater company in Memphis, Tennessee, and all of my crew were interns.
Wow.
And you have to teach them everything. They come in, they know a lot, but there's an awful lot that they don't know, and that's different with every production, because that's the nature of what we do. So teaching became a thing, and the students, you'd become mentors to the students, and you'd have to guide them through, I say students, interns, students, mm-hmm. And that became part of how I functioned and how I learned to function in all theater environments, which I think is really good in every environment, to learn from the people, to teach, to share information and knowledge. So that's how teaching happened. Now, as far as teaching at a university, never expected to do that, ever. Ever in my life did I ever expect to teach at a university. To be honest, I did not enjoy university myself.
Okay.
I didn't, it's true. I was very frustrated when I was a student, because I felt like I was put in a situation where there were so many demands on my time that I had to do the bare minimum just to get the work done, and I wasn't able to fully explore it or really learn it in a way that I felt I wanted to and I needed to, because I just had to get it done. So I felt like I was in a situation where I was being forced to do inferior work because there weren't enough hours in the day. And that's what I didn't like about being in university. Mm-hmm. And that may have been my particular program and the situation and other factors at the time. But after that experience, I said, no, I don't want to. Teaching wasn't even a thing on my radar, mm-hmm. Until I went to graduate school. And teaching was part of what I had to do. As part of my assistantship, it was required. And I fell in love with it I'd never been in a situation like that before that wasn't more of a mentorship situation where I was actually in front of the classroom and working with students in that way. And again, like the light moment, it was like, oh, this fits, this really fits. And I never saw it coming.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? So you enjoyed the classroom. It just seems so counterintuitive to what you said before, because what you said before sounded like, well, what you really wanted to be was an artist in the theater.
Yeah, it's all the same in some way, right? You know, being an artist in front of a classroom, being an artist in the theater, it's doing it, it's talking about it, it's learning about it, because that learning aspect was always there, and that excitement for me about learning new things and about how the field is always changing and about how it's always a new challenge. I think that teaching wasn't far away from that.
Yeah.
But because of my experience in undergraduate, the idea of teaching in a traditional sense, it just never occurred to me. But you know, you don't have to do it the same way it was done when you were a student, right?
Right.
You can change it and you can make it different and try to take away those things that weren't good for you.
Right.
Which is what I try to do.
Yeah. So what do you try to do in your classrooms?
I try to make it a safe place, which is the most important thing, is that my students are comfortable. And with technical theater, that can be a difficult thing. We're working with often very advanced equipment that's very complicated, it's very technology driven. And there are a lot of artists young artists in particular, that are a little overwhelmed by the technology. The sense of, wow, I can't do this if I don't understand all of this complicated stuff and all of these machines and how do you use this machine to make art. And that's a lot of what we do from the technical theater side. It's a very different world than it was 100 years ago. My goodness, there's technology in every aspect of what I do now. And what I try to do is to make that a comfortable thing and to make it a safe place so that they understand that it's a really big learning curve. It takes time, it takes practice. And what I find, often my students are frustrated when what they see in their head doesn't come out on paper right away. And I understand that. It frustrates me too. I think it frustrates every artist in the world, right?
Yeah.
But that you have to be okay with it because that's part of the process. And the more you do it, the better you get, and making sure that there's that understanding that you don't have to be what you think of as an incredible artist in order to be a designer, in order to work in technical theater. You don't have to be able to draw. You need to be able to accomplish communication through visual means. And there are different ways of doing that. So opening up their eyes to the different ways of doing that, trying to get rid of the sense of, well, I can't draw, so I can't do this, and being able to really keep it safe and the realistic expectations there are the most important things. And that's how I approach teaching technical theater and design from a very broad standpoint.
Can you think of like an assignment or something that you do that accomplishes that? Like how you bring what you said, what is in somebody's mind down onto a piece of paper or onto a stage eventually?
But the one in particular comes to mind was actually a costume project. Now, costuming is not something that I designed myself, but being a technical theater design discipline, it's very similar in its approach in many ways. One of the courses that I taught just last year was actually rendering for theater, and rendering, what it is it's learning to communicate visually, to communicate your ideas in different ways. One of the projects that I gave the students was they needed to render a costume. Now, that can sound scary and complicated, and how do you do this? Most costume designers draw and they paint with watercolor. I say most. A lot of them do. It's the traditional medium.
Like a figure,
like
person.
a figure. You draw this figure with your amazing, talented hand drawing, making this beautifully proportioned person, and then painting them with detailed watercolor paints, which are skills that take years, a lifetime to get really good at, right? Not a skill that I have myself. Right. I do everything digitally these days. It's easier, it's faster, that's how I tend to work. But I teach them all of the different ways so that they have an experience and can choose what works best for them and then focus on that. This particular project was one of our first costume projects, and the idea of drawing and painting was scary. It's like, all right, well, let's show how we can do this without drawing and without painting. So they were given a figure, Disney princesses, actually, because the students had made it clear on one occasion or another to just come up that they liked Disney movies.
Okay.
So I gave them
They're
Disney.
20.
So I gave them Disney princesses, right? It was like, all right, let's use something you're interested in. They got to pick which one they wanted, and then they had to use mixed media and reproduce the costume that was on the person.
Okay, an existing costume. They just had to reproduce it.
They
Okay.
had to take this existing costume and reproduce it. And what that does, if you're doing it without drawing and without painting, is to think about how you can communicate visually without skills that you know you don't have, right?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
skills do you have? Well, anyone can get fabric, can cut it up, can glue, can staple, can attach things in such a way. It's like, it's almost craft time. Let's play.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They had to go and they found all kinds of different materials, fabrics, magazine clippings, all kinds of things that came in and then became different layers in these dresses. So the resulting renderings had not only beautiful color, but they also had texture, and they also were three-dimensional to a certain extent because they had layers of fabric. And what we ended up with were really beautiful renderings of these costumes, and no one drew a thing or painted a thing.
Which a director could then really get a sense by looking at such a, rendering, could really get a sense of what this designer had in mind.
Absolutely.
Which is the point.
Absolutely. And it gives you a sense in a very different way, right?
Right.
From what we're used to seeing, yet very effective. And that's the point. It's, you can do this. You can actually do this. Look what you did. You didn't have to spend years working on a skill to paint. You should still do that, don't get me wrong. But you could do this. So it's, what can you do to communicate that works for you, that accomplishes the purpose? Now, it's not appropriate for every production to use that style,
Right.
But you could use a very similar style. Depending on the show, maybe you wouldn't want to go three-dimensional. Maybe you could just use cutouts of magazines and it would be very flat. But there's lots of different options that you can do, and it's knowing that there are options, there are alternatives, that the important thing is communicating, not being this amazing artist, right?
That's very interesting, the art of communication. Certainly in the theater, it's all teamwork.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of teaching around that too, isn't there?
Oh my goodness. It's all, the two most important things that I teach my students, the earlier students who are just being introduced into theater in their first couple of years, is the two words I harp, are communication and collaboration. Because we have nothing without those two things. You need both of them, right? You can have really amazing ideas, but if you can't communicate them, how can you possibly make that work to a team of people? And we always have a team of people. It's not a one-person job, and it never will be.
The teaching about collaboration, how would you say that happens in your teaching? Because that's not easy to teach in a classroom. A person doing an assignment of a costume rendering is one thing. But if the second most important thing is this collaboration, in your experience, how do you make that happen as a teacher in a drama program?
Well, several different ways. I think that group projects become a much more common thing in a lot of drama classes than they perhaps are in other disciplines. That way you really are relying on more than just yourself, and you're learning how to work with other people. So that becomes a thing, working on projects together. In my design classes, even when the students are working on individual projects, they are encouraged, and we always have open communication in the classroom. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about what's working for you, what's not, what ideas can we be sharing, because it's getting the sense of this community. And the community is very important for the collaboration. Being able to, it's okay to talk. It's okay to talk to each other. So often in a classroom, I struggle with getting the students to the point where they feel like they can talk, because many of them are very used to sitting behind a desk, listening to a professor, don't say anything unless you have a question. And what we do in drama is very different. And it has to be, because of the nature of that collaboration. We need to be able to talk, we need to be okay with it. So getting them comfortable with talking and communicating and being able to share our experiences is very important, because so much of what we learn is through seeing what other people do, right? And I think that's critical. So in my classrooms, my design classrooms, there's always a lot of talking.
Yeah.
You know, which is very different from other classes and even other classes that I've taught. You know, there are times when I do get up and I lecture and they listen, and that's the thing, but to have as much open communication about what you're doing and what's working and what isn't and what other people have discovered is great. We learn from each other. So every project that they turn in, they don't just turn it in, they present it to the class, they talk about their process, and they have a chance to ask questions from the other students so that we can really understand how we've all been working. So even when we don't have group projects, we still have group projects in a way to help build towards that collaboration. One of the biggest ways that the students get that sense of collaboration is by actually working on the productions. And they get class credit to do that here, which is fantastic, so that they, you know, can be taking the time, because it is a very time-intensive thing working on a show, but you really get the sense of being part of the whole. Every single person in the production is important and does something that's important, and if they're not there, something won't happen or has to be covered by somebody else, and that sense of being part of that happens. And I think that's why a lot of people love theater, because they do love that sense of, I'm really important.
Yeah,
right? We're
yeah.
all part of this. We're all making this really amazing thing happen.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful.
And I think it's really interesting because in listening to you and thinking about teaching in general, I mean, a lot of people are trying to get at this participatory learning, right, and mentorship. And I think you're right. I think in the drama department that there's this sense that actually it's absolutely crucial because a show is live. That the way that the design students and the technical students are involved is so interesting. You say they get class credit, so how does that happen? I mean, how do you even evaluate some person?
Well, they're evaluated in a couple of different ways depending on which level of a course it is, right? In the level 1 section of the course, it's a pass or fail. Did you do the thing that you're supposed to do? Did you not do the thing you're supposed to do? It's pretty simple, right? But in the upper level courses, portfolio courses, they are graded on a grading scale. And that is, subjective in some sense because every show is different. So every role that a person has is going to change. Even if it's the same position, it's different on a different production because every show is different. So it's challenging in the sense of you can't just say, oh, did they do this, 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 and this? Oh, great, they get an A because they may have needed to do this, but not this on this show. So really you have to look at each show individually, and you really can't grade somebody on how good of an artist they are. Like, I'm not going to grade a student on how good their design is or isn't, because they're learning to design. This is part of their education and part of their process. What I can grade them on is, were you prepared? Did you do your work on time? Did you complete all of the necessary steps? How was your communication? So it's really looking at all of the elements that are involved with the job and the position that aren't actually the art part, right? And that determines the grade, because at this point, it's about effort, it's about preparedness, it's about the communication, it's about collaboration. Are you collaborating? These are things you can be graded on, but it really does become a case-by-case situation. You have to pay attention to, what did that student do? How did they interact? Were they ready? How did it work as a whole? So it becomes very intensive because it's so different.
I get the sense that you never go home. Because our productions happen at night.
Our productions do happen at night. There are times when I do feel like a zombie the next morning. Luckily, most theater classes don't start too early, and that's probably why. If you're in rehearsal until 11 o'clock, hopefully you don't have an 8 a.m. class. That would be unkind, right? It is a very busy schedule. There's a lot of hours that are outside of normal, right? A lot of evenings, a lot of weekends. Every show that I work on as a scenic designer on, I'm painting every weekend as soon as the scenery is built, because that's when the space is available.
Right.
And it's not the middle of the night.
I mean, you've talked a bit about maybe these limitations on time that have to do with maybe the liberal education mandate of this university. Are there things that are positive about that in your experience for your students? The fact that they are required to go beyond, to not just take only drama classes?
I think exposure to all things is incredibly important, right? I think from not only just a personal standpoint, but from an educational standpoint, that as part of the learning and developing and understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it and who we're doing it for and how everything works together, no one is in a bubble, and you can't be. And I think it's critical for education and for self-growth for students to have to do other things, to have access to that. And when you start looking at things from the really broad spectrum, you really see how it all fits together and how one thing influences another. And that's one of the things that I think is important for them to understand, that I think a lot of students don't. They go to an English class or literature and think just about the literature, and the history class and think just about the history, and then art and think just about the art. But if you step back, you can see what happens in history is affecting what's happening in the literature, which is affecting what's happening in the art, and how it's all related. And that getting that broad sense of it is really important. You really need to understand where it's stemming from, where it's coming from, where it's going, because that's what we do. We do art. Art is often a reflection of what's happening in the world. You need to know what's going on, what movements have created what, and it's all related and tied together a lot closer than I think a lot of students realize until later on in their lives. So
Right.
absolutely, I think it's critical. I
Yeah.
think it's very important.
I want to maybe focus in on what you've said to me was your passion, lighting, and trying to think about lighting and what are the what are the current challenges in the field and in teaching about lighting. Everybody feels like, oh, this is an area of great innovation. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that and how you prepare students for that kind of innovation.
When it comes to lighting, one of the biggest challenges that I have in general, as far as not just teaching, but being a professional designer, is the idea that lighting is so new and it's so difficult to communicate lighting, right? You can make a little model of a set and say, here, look at this is what it's gonna look like. Right? You can draw the costumes and say, okay, here, this is what they're gonna look like. I can get samples of fabric, I can show that to you. With lighting, I don't have anything physical and tangible that I can show. So the biggest challenge is being able to communicate it in a way that is effective, that people understand. And people understand and visualize things differently. And to a certain extent, you have to visualize lighting. And that's a challenge depending on who you're working with in the situation, right? So one of the things that I spend the most time on myself personally, and as well teaching my students, is how do you communicate light? Because you're communicating not only what it looks like, but you're also communicating what it feels like and how it's going to affect the overall impression from the audience and how that changes. It's orchestration. Every moment looks a little different. How is it different? How do these changes support the storytelling and what's happening? And that's the biggest challenge in lighting. Lighting is relatively new, right? Lighting has been around for really, when you look at the broad scheme of history, not that long that we've had the kind of control of lighting that we do now. And it's developed and it's changed. In history, it was added in lighting very late. It was you did all the play, you did all the rehearsals, you plan everything, and then you go to the space, and then they light the chandeliers and they light the candles and that's it.
Right.
And that's what you have. So it became a later...
Or you perform in daylight.
So it became a later addition and it's struggling still to become not a late addition. And one of the things that I try to be involved in when I'm working on a show and when I'm teaching about a show and when I'm explaining to students how the process works is that as a lighting designer, you need to be there from the beginning. Right? A lot of the time, it's going to happen where someone's going to say, oh, we've got everything else figured out, now we're going to add in lights. No, you need to be there as part of that process because lighting affects everything that's happening. But not everyone realizes that or knows that or understands how that works. It's the sense of, oh, you're lighting on top of what's there. but lighting really can be much more effective by being part of the whole process, being designed early on as part of the staging, as part of the scenic. When it's part of the early process, it's more effective, right? And that's one of the challenges about doing it. That's one of the challenges about teaching it, is that you have to do a lot more work as a lighting designer really early on to become a part of that process. Sometimes I've had to force my way in, and really try to change the opinions of people of no, we don't just add lights after. That's not how it works.
Right.
We are a very important design element that if we have these conversations now, that moment that you want at the end where the guy, dies can be much more strong because we're making this part of it as opposed to putting it on after. So difficult to explain. Hopefully I'm getting the sense of that.
Yeah, no, it's
but
really interesting because as somebody who's worked on shows, that's been my experience, is the lighting designer comes in the last meetings and you give them a play-by-play and, then they light it. And I think in dance it's different because there usually are no sets. And so I think maybe choreographers understand that lighting is it. Teaching that to students, like you say, so intangible. I mean, what occurs to me is, aren't there computer programs that can show you what light is going to look like on the set?
There are some, yeah. There are more and more, right? Technology is advancing incredibly quickly, especially computer technologies, programming, all of that is possible. It's not easy, and it's expensive. Not only do you have to pay for really expensive programs and then learn how to use them, then they change and other programs come out, then you have to learn those, but you also have to have the computers and that are able to run that software.
High-end computers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of what I have to budget into my life is having really good technology at my house, right? Not at work, but I have to be able to own this because I have to use it all the time. It needs to be able to do what I need to do. I have to run these huge, expensive programs all of the time. It becomes a thing. So like artists who have to buy oil paints and canvases and these things that are incredibly expensive, I have to do the same thing, but in a different way.
Right. And why can't we provide that to our students? Or why wouldn't we provide that? I mean, what's, is that something to strive for?
Well, yes, it is something to strive for. One of my personal goals, actually, but we'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
It's hard to provide something that's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Right? So in our field, there are a couple of programs that have been the programs, There are so many. If I wanted to draft a set, there are dozens of programs I could choose from. Right? So to some extent, you have to wait to see which one becomes the industry standard, and then accept the fact that the industry standard may change in a couple of years, right? So the challenge of providing it to our students is, what are we providing? There are so many. Where do we go to? What do we provide? What's going to be most beneficial to them? Because you can't provide everything. That's not viable from a technology or a financial standpoint to be able to support that.
Right.
So what do you do? Right? So it really is a question of knowing what the industry is doing, paying attention to what looks like it's going to become the industry standard, and choosing to learn and focus on that. And we do the best we can to have that available, hopefully. I make sure that I'm always up with what new programs are happening and what theater people are using. Do I always have a chance to learn it or the finances to buy it? No. But I try to be familiar with it and aware of it and see where it's going. And if it looks like it's going to become an industry standard, well, then I need to learn it and I need to buy it, and that needs to be part of what I start teaching my students.
Right.
It needs to be a thing. It's been a challenge, I think, at a lot of universities as the technology has changed, being able to keep up with it from an educational standpoint. There have been huge leaps and bounds just in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
20 years ago, every designer was hand drafting everything. Now, 90% of the designers I know are drafting on a computer, right? It very much changes it, and keeping up with that is hard. It's hard and it's expensive.
And drama is not, the gaming industry, like in the media, where they get new programs all the time because they can make money.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't. One of my goals here is to provide that for the students, because we don't right now. And in my classes, in my rendering class, we did not only hand render, we also digitally rendered. because they need to, that's a thing that's happening. It's not going to go away. You need to be introduced to it and to learn it. There are some programs that we do have that are available on campus computer labs. I actually got some programs installed last year that are industry standard that students need to be able to use and have access to on our computer labs. There are certain labs that have programs that nowhere else has for our students.
Oh, great.
One of my personal goals is to have a drama computer lab that has specifically these computers with the programs we need and not all the extra stuff, and all of the programs that are industry standard. You know, if I look at drafting, there are 2 programs that the students really need to know, you know, and we don't have access to either one, right?
Yeah.
Now I teach them how to get their own access. A lot of these programs have free educational licenses. They can get them on their own computers if they have their own computers that can run the programs. And that's the challenge. Most students have their own computers. A lot of them couldn't run the programs.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain kind of computer.
Right.
So then it changes the game a bit, right?
Yeah.
But
if we back up from that, surely the principles or the ideas about lighting or about whatever design are what feeds into the actual process of doing the design on a computer.
Absolutely.
So surely some of the teaching is that front loading, that, well, what is it that we're going to put in here? Which is really primary.
Absolutely.
Surely.
When I think of skills as far as things that you do, it's like, okay, if you're building a set, that's a thing that you do. If you're painting a set, it's a thing that you physically do. If you're drafting, that's a thing you physically do. When you're designing, it's here. And how do you communicate that? How are those thoughts and the choices that you want to make and the thoughts that you're having supporting the story? And that absolutely doesn't require any technology other than you learning to take these thoughts and make them into words and pictures and ways to communicate them, which is really hard to do, especially because it's not something that we usually do in life. You know, even from a more traditional artistic standpoint, you take your thoughts and you make art, you know, but describing it and supporting it and talking about how it all works and where it came from and what it's doing, those aren't things that people learn how to do often. And that's what we make our students do, right? You need to understand where the ideas are coming from, how they're being supportive, be willing to change them and flexible, and talk about them and communicate. So it all does come back to that communication and then that collaboration of being able to work with a group willingly about these ideas and how do all of the ideas from all of the different people work together.
Right.
These are the most fundamental important things about what we can teach them. I want to teach them how to draft. It's communication. I want to teach them how to build. All of these things do relate to them coming out of here with the ability to really go do things, but the communication and the collaboration, absolutely most important.
And the imagination. That's what I'm hearing too. The imagination.
Yeah.
The imagination in order to make something that will spark somebody else to say, oh, great.
I go without saying, for me, the imagination is there for everybody. It's really a question of learning how to utilize it and be aware of it and tap into it. Right?
Well, you're teaching a course right now, you were saying, called Exploring Creativity. So from the very specialized courses in design we've been talking about, the other end of the spectrum is this course for kind of non-majors called Exploring Creativity. Do you want to talk about teaching that? Because it's all about the imagination, isn't it?
It is all about the imagination. Absolutely. I love teaching this course. It is so much fun. It's very, very different from teaching drama students. Right? Drama students are in art. They're in an art form. They're there to become part of art. They want to explore and create and be part of this amazing production process. It comes naturally, I think, to most of them because they're in the arts. This is what they've been drawn to. The students in Exploring Creativity are not art majors. They're not drama majors. And the sense of engaging creativity, which I strongly believe that we all have but don't necessarily tap into, is really a challenge. One of the first things that we talk about in the class is, well, what is creativity and how creativity is subjective, right? It's different for every person. We engage it differently. What does all of this mean and why are we here today, right? And so many of them say, well, I'm not creative, but I want to be, right? Or, I've never been a creative sort, but this sounded like it would be fun. Or I had to take a glur. So this seemed like a good option, not too hard. These are the things that we talk about. And one of the things that by the end of the class, I think is fascinating is that every single person in that room, even the half of them that said they weren't creative, now consider themselves creative. And it becomes a question of, it's not that I wasn't creative, I didn't realize it, I didn't tap into it, I didn't engage it, I didn't realize what I was doing was creative, or how creativity could be beneficial. So it's really bringing out something that's there and really showing a new approach. So it's another tool to use, and that's a way that I think a lot of non-artsy people can use it, is that it's a tool. We want our toolboxes to be as full as possible. We want to be able to approach things as many ways as we can to be successful in whatever you do. And the creativity is a huge, huge part of that. So
how does it happen? I mean, it's a mysterious thing. How do you teach it? I mean, surely people are thinking, well, you can't teach creativity, and there we are. We've got a course called that. We're teaching it.
To some extent, you can't teach the skill of creativity, but you can teach how to engage creativity, right? And what I do in the class, well, a couple of things. Every day we have activities that hopefully spur and engage creativity. You have to come up with solutions that are not a standard solution. One of the first exercises in class that we do is brain teasers, right? Brain teasers, many of them, we've heard of brain teasers before. A lot of people, you've got this problem and you've got the solution and you've heard the brain teaser before, you know what the solution is. It's okay, can't use that solution. What's another solution, right? Then you're engaging creativity because you're having to come up with not the easy answer, but a different answer. Or you make the question more complicated, like, okay, great, here's the problem. Oh, there's this twist to the problem, so now the other solution doesn't work anymore. So even just trying to figure something out in a different way, that engages creativity. You're creatively approaching the problem. So it's really fascinating, and it's even from a sense of something very simple like that to projects where they have to figure out, okay, I'm going to think about a creative person that's not an artist. Okay, if this person is not an artist, they need to research them, come up with why is that person creative? What do they do that's creative? How do they engage their creativity? So not only are you looking at what you can do, but you're saying, oh, look at this big business tycoon. Here's how he was creative. He made this thing that had never existed, or he developed this product in a different way. And that's creativity. It's everywhere. It's recognizing it and learning how to tap into it. So once they realize that a lot of the things that they do or things that they could do could be creative or are involving and engaging creativity, they realize that it's not that they don't have it, it's that they aren't necessarily aware of it or don't tap into it anymore. And do again. So,
do you ever get converts out of that class? Converts that come into the drama department?
I have had several students last year that took drama classes with me because they took Exploring Creativity with me. And they wanted to be part of the creative process in some way again.
Right.
So.
Oh, that's fabulous, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is. It really is fabulous. It's exciting. One of the most exciting things to me as a teacher is to open up the eyes of students, right? And this class, Exploring Creativity, does that in a different kind of way from traditional drama classes who have students who are already very into the arts and, right. Exactly. Yeah. So it's exciting, and I do thoroughly enjoy it. I have my students right now creating their entire imaginary worlds. That's their final project, what they've been working for over the past several weeks, is they have to actually create something completely on their own, out of their minds. We do exercises in class every day towards building part of their world. So not only have we talked about it and we've done other exercises to engage it, but they actually do have to create something as well. So it's pretty exciting. And there's no one that's going to be able to come after this class and not say, look, I made this. I made this. 'Cause they did. And that's exciting.
Yeah, sure.
It's very exciting.
You're not following the rules of the essay. You're not, doing a multiple choice exam.
Right, exactly. Well, and when I do a show and it's opening night and I'm watching and the audience is there for the first time, I often get that feeling of, we did this. Look what we did. We accomplished this amazing thing, and it's affecting people, and that's amazing. And that sort of sense is what I want to bring to these students as well. That, look, you are a part of something. You created something. You can continue to create things.
Right. That's so interesting, too, in the way that you're talking about how they can connect creativity to their own way of being in the world, right? That's a really big, also a really big goal of liberal education. I think it's wonderful. It sounds like a gift to these students at this stage where they're in the middle of learning lots of things. If they have the gift of accessing creativity, it's going to be a really big factor for the rest of their studies.
Absolutely. I think it's very, very important. I think every student should learn art and be part of that world. And for a lot of those same reasons, it is very important for the broad education, if you will, to be able to understand how it all fits together, and any tools that you can have and any things that you can do to make yourself better and the learning experience better and understand how everything works together, the better, and hopefully have fun doing it, right?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't enjoy undergraduate school, but I did enjoy the learning, right?
Yeah.
I enjoyed what I was learning about. I enjoyed the education itself, right? And I hope to instill that in the students as well. What I find most interesting about the Exploring Creativity class is how the students so quickly became a community. When you broke down the barriers of teacher and student and put everyone in a circle and you're talking about creativity and how we can use it and what does it mean and what can we do with it and how can you engage it in your daily life and how can it be beneficial to us. Really the sense of we're talking, and not only are we learning from each other, but we're also able to communicate better with other people because we're actually talking to other people about things that matter, that can be relevant, that we can apply to our lives. And it becomes this safe place where people feel like they're welcome, that they want to come to. Almost every day, every single student is there and on time. And they want to be there. And that's really wonderful.
I've heard that from other students, that theater courses are one of the places where we most successfully find community because of that need to be with other people and to actually work on things together, but also the art itself, the opening of possibility rather than the narrowing of I've got to get the right answer. It seems to help to create community, whether you're going to be an artist or not, right?
Absolutely. Good life skills, regardless of what you're going to do. One of my students' biggest challenges that I would say from what I hear and what they tell me is that I don't tell them exactly what to do, right? I have so many students that say, well, how do you want me to? I don't want you to do it in a certain way. You can present your project however you so choose. Well, can I use a video? Sure. Can I use a written thing? Sure. Well, what do you want? How do you think will best show off your work?
That's a huge decision, right? Isn't it?
It's a huge thing. And it's so very difficult for many of them because they're so used to being told, this is what you need to do.
Here's
These
the
are
format,
the rules.
yeah.
Do this thing, and you'll do okay. You may not get a great part, but you'll do okay if you just do the thing the way you're supposed to do the thing. But when you tell them there's no specific way to do the thing, here's your project, you only have 2 rules, it's really hard, but I think really good for them. Really good for them because out there in the world, no one's going to tell you, I want it exactly like this. If you're going to make a presentation to someone, you're going to propose something, you decide how it's going to look and how you're going to present that. So seeing that now and getting a sense of that, I think is really excellent. But I see how hard it is for them.
Not enough practice.
Not enough practice to get to start somewhere. And there's also a sense of, which is interesting to me too, the sense of, well, what do you want that you're not telling us that you want that we have to infer that you want?
Yeah.
Right? And I hope that...
Thinking that you're a tricky teacher.
Thinking, right. Or thinking that maybe, there's more to it than that. I I hope that there isn't. I
But there's
try
a
to be
fear, isn't there,
transparent.
for students?
There is a
They're
fear.
afraid of failure, aren't they? And they, yeah, you know, they want to
Hugely.
succeed, and they, you know, they want to, yeah.
Well, one of
Lot of
my
fear.
biggest challenges as a teacher is to get away from that fear, right? Because you're right. So much focus is on the grade and not the learning. And I understand that to a certain extent, right? You know, if you've got scholarships, if you're going to go on to graduate school, the grades matter. They do matter. But the focus is often on the grade. Like, what do I need to do to get the grade I want? Not, what is this project about and what are we learning? Which hopefully, if you learn the thing, you'll get the good grade, right?
Well, yeah.
Hopefully that's a thing. But that is definitely not the focus. And that, seeing the challenge of them wanting to know exactly what to do and exactly what I want from them, it's because if they know exactly what I want and exactly what they're supposed to do and they do it, then they'll get the good grade.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of the things
But
that
it may not be creative for them.
it may not be creative for them, absolutely. And for me, one of the things I tell them is like, it's not about the grade. And I know that it's not about the grade for me, and that to some extent it has to be about the grade for you, but let's not focus on the grade. If you do the thing, you'll do well, right? If you take the time, if you focus on the energy, if you really do the exploration, the grade will happen. But getting them to the point where they believe that, where the trust is there, that that's the case, it takes a little while.
Yeah.
It does.
Especially with people not used to that open-ended approach.
So I try, when they do have projects due, to get the grades back to them very quickly so that they know where they stand. Because that not knowing where they stand makes them uncomfortable. Because they knew if they did the thing exactly the way it was supposed to, that they would do this grade. But if they don't have a thing they're supposed to do an exact way, then it's, how did I do? You know,
Right.
as opposed to knowing, having a sense of knowing what you did.
Right.
So it's a challenge, but they've adapted. They've gotten used to it. They've seemed to enjoy it this way, but
And it's a lot of pressure on you as a teacher. There's 40 people in this class. It's not like you're working with 10 people.
working with 10 people is much easier. It's true. I was working with 40, and they all have different needs, wants, ways of communicating.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
one of the hard things anytime you have a group of that many people and you're trying to have open communication in forums is that you need to make sure that it's not the same 5 people talking all of the time.
Right.
When you do have communications, and that can be, you know, difficult from the sense of I can call on anyone I want to, but some people aren't comfortable talking in that kind of way, or they need time to process before they can talk, and it's engaging the group and making that comfortable.
I know you're a teacher who's eager to keep learning about teaching, because I've seen you at events at the Teaching Center.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested to know what you feel like you'd like to know more about as a teacher, or what you feel are your challenges, and what you're thinking about in terms of innovation with your own teaching.
When I think about my own teaching and innovation, I think about how I can become more hands-on in the classroom. For all of the studio and the lab classes, we're automatically hands-on. That's how it works, right? But in some of the more traditional classes that I teach that are more lecture-based, it is a question of how I can engage the students in a different way. And that's something that I'm always trying to do, and find the balance between here's all the information and what can we do? What activities can we do that can help you learn this as well? And keep the students engaged and interested. Break up the long lecture session with something in between is often what I try to do. And continuing that exploration. I want to do more of that. I think it's better. Right?
Yeah.
If for no other reason, then it gets the students engaged. But I think they can also learn that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's keeping that, right? The last thing I want to do is be a class that students feel like if they could read the chapters in the book, they don't need to be there.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's not it.
No.
Right?
No.
And that's pretty important and critical to me. So many of the design classes and the other hands-on things that I do teach are by nature, I think, very different from a lot of other
Interactive.
courses.
Real mentoring, yeah.
Absolutely. They're very often one-on-one. You have many of the design classes have a dozen or less students. So you're really able to focus and really bring out the strengths of each person and talk each person through every project, which is fantastic. In larger classes, it's how do we maintain that sense of individuality and mentorship on a broad scale. It's difficult, and that's the future to me, is how can we make this 40-person class feel like a 12-person class?
Right.
To what extent is that possible, and what activities help make that happen?
Your own inspiration and your own research. We're at a university, and you have to maintain your own creativity and your own inspiration. And so how do you do that? How do you keep that fire burning? And then how does it communicate back to your students? What?
The fire for me is always there, right? So it's never been a question of how do you keep the fire burning? The fire burns, right?
Right.
Good.
The
passion has been there. For me, it's never gone away. Since I was 14 years old and I saw that light, this was it. It's always been there. Every production is exciting to me.
But let's get really specific. What recently really gets you going? That really is, that really gets you up in the morning and says, really want to do this.
I feel that way about every production that I work on. I really do.
I'm trying to pin you down.
Right now, we're working on The Drowning Girls.
The Drowning
Girls is one of our main stage shows this fall, and I'm designing the lighting and the scenery for that. And I'm really excited about it. Over the summer, because no one's here and we're all off doing our own creative and research endeavors, whatever they may be, it's had a bit of a hiatus. A lot of the design work was done for the scenery over last spring. We figured out what the set is going to look like, what the fabric is going to be. All of these processes began. Now we're back. The challenges have begun. Right. Now it's, we can't get that color pool liner. So now how do we make this work? What do we test? So it's always another challenge. And the challenge is the best part, figuring out how to make it work.
So what are the particular challenges in Drowning Girl? I mean, it's a contemporary play.
It is.
Yeah.
The challenges are, the script calls for 3 bathtubs with functioning water is a huge challenge to do on a stage, period. And on a stage at a university is also a challenge as well. And there's different guidelines that you have to follow, different safety procedures, and different things that make it more complicated using a university space in general. So our challenges now are, we're not going to go with 3 bathtubs. We're going to go with 1 large tub. There's not going to be running water, but we need to heat our water, right? So where's the heater going to go? What kind of technology are we going to use that's going to maintain the design, not take away from the acting, and still accomplish the purpose? So right now, it's in all of the details. I'm about to work on the lighting for the production. A lot of the lighting for me happens as part of the rehearsal process. So I like to be there in rehearsal as much as I can and have conversations with the director of, if this happens, we can light it in this way, which supports the action in this way, and really be part of the process, as opposed to coming in later and adding lights on top.
How wonderful, though.
Which is
how wonderful
not
for
what
the
I prefer
director.
in life,
Yeah.
right? So I'm about to be in rehearsal a lot pretty soon here, and that's exciting. Being able to discover and enhance what's happening in the production through the medium of light, it is my passion. It excites me, it never goes away. And the technology is always changing. The challenges for every production are different. The challenges in this is we have a small, relatively small, static area. How do we keep that visually interesting? For me, you keep it visually interesting through lighting. Lighting is going to guide the audience and their vision, and changing the color and the lighting is going to support what's happening emotionally with the characters, and that's exciting. Well, how do we change the colors? Well, we're going to use LED lighting to change the colors, right? Is what we're going to do in this particular production. Might not be what you do somewhere else. So staying up with the technology and being able to have the technology that works for that is so important, and knowing what's coming out in the world and what's going on so that you know what tools you have to work with, right? It's like if creativity is part of your toolbox, what is our toolbox to be able to communicate what this design needs, right? Can you do it with 5 lights? You can. Can you do it more effectively with LEDs that can change color at the drip of a button? Absolutely.
Right.
So I'm always excited because it's always a new puzzle to solve. And there's always different ways to solve it. It's what way can we solve it that's going to work in our time frame, within our budget, and be the most effective, right? So it's always different and it's always fun. And in order to do that, you have to know what's happening in the world. You have to know how the technology is changing.
How do you do professional development courses? How do you find that out?
There are lots of ways that you can find that out. There are trade shows for technology.
I bet.
Every single year, all of the time, in different parts of the world, right? If you wanted to see what's happening elsewhere. There are magazines, there are articles, there are places that focus on design and technology and what's happening in the performance industry. I have subscriptions to all of these. I read the magazines. I read the articles online. You see what's going on.
And you go to productions, I suppose.
And you go to productions, absolutely. And so you see, if I'm ever at a production, I don't know how they did something. Oh, I find out. Like, in some ways, I suppose that could be a bad thing. I don't ever watch a show and just appreciate the beauty of it without going, I could do that. How did they do that?
Stealing, yeah.
It's true. Even in life.
In the arts, everybody steals everything.
I tell you,
it's a secret, but it's true.
It's true. You steal, modify, adapt, it becomes your own. It's great.
Yeah.
But even in life, I can't even watch a sunset with my daughter. She gives me such a hard time. I'll say, oh, that's so pretty. Oh, if I had a light that, like, how can I recreate this on stage? This is what occurs to me all of the time.
Right.
I see pretty, shadow from a tree and how it's moving. My thought is, oh, that's really pretty. I store that effect to use on stage in life later on.
When can I use that? Oh.
So it becomes like this long list of things everywhere with everything I experience. So it's interesting, but you expose yourself. You get up, you keep up with what's going on in the industry, what's going on with technology. And I mean, there are times when I deviate from theater technology altogether. I've certainly used architectural lighting fixtures in productions before because it's what do I need that's going to accomplish this thing? We might not have that as a theatrical fixture yet, so how do we do it? What can we create? How do we make this
From the local lighting store.
Yeah, from the local lighting store or from anywhere. So it's really, I think, goes back to the roots of theater, and it's a sense of how do we create this thing and not thinking about, oh, well, I have to use this or I have to use, no. How do you solve this, in the best possible way? And that's always exciting. It never goes away. It's never been less exciting.
Oh,
even
fabulous.
if I don't like the play, I like the challenge.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Well, I think that passion and that excitement must communicate to your students, and I've certainly seen that around the department. You're a very welcome new teacher there, Lee, and hope to have you there for a very, very long time.
Me too.
So thank you so much. I think that we'll end there, and we'll see you in the hallways and late at night in the theater.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay.